Hello and welcome to the Ambistream Media Future Podcast. I'm Michael Fiorentino, founder of Ambistream. In this podcast, we'll share ideas about the future of media, tech, AI, and a little bit of Web3. We'll look at user habits and trends, and I'll share updates on what we're building and featuring as a company, giving you a behind-the-scenes look at the ideas turning into reality with just enough chaos to keep it interesting. AI shapes a lot of the content you see online. Your social media feeds and ads are not random or posted in chronological order. That's because AI is curating a lot of it. But who's controlling that? And what does that mean for consumers, creators, and the future of media in general? So today we're going to talk about the evolution of AI, social media, and payment models, and some other fun things like ethical and legal challenges that are happening right now. I'm Michael Fiorentino, and I've worked in the advertising industry, aka ad tech, in New York City for over a decade. I was the head of marketing at an interactive video and advertising company that made some of the first streaming TV ads. I was also at Yahoo, which is probably like the least cool of all the tech companies at the time, and also at some more obscure tech companies that specialize in online advertising that use big data and algorithms to deliver what they called the right ad to the right person at the right time, also known as programmatic advertising. More recently, I've run some internship programs for college students who wanted experience in UX, online marketing, management consulting, and investment banking. I'm occasionally a VJ at clubs and events, and I've also helped some big tech companies interpret the differences between European data laws and policies and how they contrast with American ones. Now I run a streaming media startup based in Lisbon and New York City, focused on AI and decentralized technologies and how they can help generate and distribute media while making sure the system pays creators fairly. Okay, so do I sound legitimate enough now? Good. Let's do a recap before we go into where all of this is headed. So usually when we talk about the origins of media distribution, people like to start with the printing press in the 1400s, but we're going to skip that and go ahead to the 20th century and look at the broadcast era. TV, radio, and newspapers. They pushed out content and it was one to many. You watched, read, or listened, and if you had an opinion about it, no one cared. You could also count early websites in this category. Then came the Web 2.0 era, the social media era. And at first it was fun and harmless, and it made everyone a creator and a consumer. Let's point a bunch of people at each other and see how this turns out. I'm sure nothing's going to go wrong with that, and I can't wait to hear what my uncles have to say. That was a joke. Okay, the measurements changed to consider things like views, likes, comments, subscribes, and sharing, and that was more important than artistic or intellectual expression. Because this tracking became the new currency, that changed what the priorities were for publishing and publicizing. And now we're in the age of AI and decentralization, which we will cover in a bit. Let's take a look at that time between this early Web 2.0 and this new AI and decentralized time period, and think about how the technology was used. The shift that happened was that ads stopped becoming hard-coded into the content. The ads became these empty boxes, and companies would fill in these areas through a bidding process to increase the likelihood of clicking on an ad from about 0.1% to 0.2% of ads. Doesn't sound like a lot, but this kind of targeting made users go from clicking one banner ad out of every 1,000 times to clicking two banner ads out of every 1,000 times, and that changed everything. Companies used vast amounts of data to learn more about the users, and sometimes they would look at personal data, sometimes they bought data from online brokers, and most of the time they just collected data by default, looking at things like the user's geographic location, their declared interests, and the content that they're posting or watching. This terminology changed to things like real-time bidding, demand-side platforms, or customer data platforms to describe this. The not-so-nice way to label this is calling it the surveillance economy. So the chronological feed was changed because of this. There was too much content to show all of the posts that the network that the user followed created. So these social networks started to prioritize content that was considered more engaging. Things like clickbait, rage bait, trolling, misinformation, and cat videos. This was one of the first large-scale commercial uses of machine learning. And it was more simple back then, more like A/B testing, picking this or picking that, and running calculations to pick the best piece of content or ads. There were predefined rules and a lot of human involvement. But the measurement was being recorded, and it was possible to know very quickly what was working and what wasn't. It's not like running a TV ad in the 90s and waiting months to see if people bought more of the company's products. This would happen right away because you're clicking and buying things, and the measurement and the data tracked all of that. Still does. Ads were turning into something different as a result of this, and there was the creation of dynamic creative optimization. So instead of a company having hundreds or thousands of ads to show to a consumer and just picking them, they would make a new mix of text, images, videos, and sounds to create the perfect ad to show to a customer. So starting around 2015, this technology got an upgrade. Deep learning models shifted from interpreting the past user data to using AI to predict future behavior from humans, and without actually having people involved. And it could adjust the content to make sure that generative AI could make new text, images, sounds, etc., based on how people will respond. So we're moving from thousands of options to millions. And maybe we'll get 3 clicks out of 1,000 instead of just 1 or 2. Some people are worried that the internet's going to turn into an AI-generated garbage dump that lacks a human soul. I don't have much to say about that. I hope we don't have that scenario happen. That can be scary, but here's a couple nicer thoughts. Most of the internet is free and it's supported by ads, or users pay for subscriptions, and that does keep the costs down quite a bit. Also, there's a lot of legal policies that have emerged, like GDPR in the European Union or CCPA in California, to protect consumers' privacy and support these economic systems. And while there are more ways to spy on you, there are also new rules coming out every couple of years that are designed to protect you, at least for now. So now let's talk about the creator economy. Lots of people post content online on these mainstream platforms. These big companies handle the hosting and distribution, which is super nice of them, and they make it easy. They take all the money, mostly from these advertisers that they connect you with, and they pay the creators whatever they feel like. It could be just enough to keep the creators from leaving, kind of like how Uber does that, where they change the prices or they just pay drivers less over time. Anyway, these companies make the rules about what they want to prioritize and promote. So they want people who post a certain amount of times a week in a certain format and with certain keywords. They don't specifically tell you what they're looking for, and they're not always saying the most accurate criteria when they do share that information. Often you have to find out through news leaks. The idea is that you have to keep them happy to earn a living from posting content if that's your main source of revenue. So who's deciding how this technology is being used? Is it a bunch of nerds in California, executives in New York, maybe authoritarian governments? Are people just throwing their hands up and saying AI without thinking deeper about this? I'm really trying not to sound so depressing and menacing, so we're going to shift this into a more encouraging conversation about where the creative economy is heading. So right now, creators have more resources than ever before to create higher quality content. They can make more of it, they could do it faster, and they could send it to more people. So there's a shift in payment models to support creators. Services like Patreon, Bandcamp, Substack, even things like Cameo and OnlyFans. People are also migrating to new social platforms based on the communities they like or the policies that the social platforms have. That's kind of new. You can own your content and users without giving it all away, and it's easier to become big on these new platforms that are growing instead of entering a mainstream crowded marketplace. So I want you to ask your friendly AI chatbot about the Blue Ocean strategy and the Fediverse to learn more about that. Also, there's this whole Web3 blockchain and crypto world that has a lot of opportunity, even if it's been associated with some bad people and companies. I'll take a moment to tell you about the way that licensing can take advantage of these new ideas. So here's an example. In the past, people used to buy physical CDs, very retro. They were relatively expensive, and it didn't matter if you only liked 2 songs of the album, you had to pay the $18 for it. Then as the internet became popular, young people started to use services like Napster and illegally traded songs to each other for free. The record companies were obviously not happy about this, and they knew that they had to change. And that's a big reason why we had services like iTunes that came around and were able to sell individual song tracks for 99 cents each. And then streaming arrived, and it pays like 0.003 cents per song stream. It's actually a more complicated system that works with record companies and calculates a bunch of things. And generally, a lot of people think it doesn't reward artists enough. So where does the decentralized Web3 world come into this? There's this concept of tokenization where physical or digital items are turned into a token that can be more sophisticated. It could do things like break media into many pieces or running code and payments directly to people. These are terms that we call fractionalization or smart contracts. It also allows us to share, remix, and monetize our media in new ways much faster. We're entering a time where we can easily split one track of audio or video into a bunch of separate layers and add new thoughts and visuals on top of it. We can potentially reinterpret our favorite media and our own fan fictions. And the flow of money can still track that user engagement, but less money could go to these old school gatekeepers, and more of it can flow to the original creators along with the remixers, curators, and promoters, probably people like you. The utopian ideal is that a large network of people can share their content and support each other. We could have access to more professional looking tools than we've ever had before, and it could save a lot of time and money. And we can make a lot more cool things. We still have to consider who controls the technologies and enforces the rules. It could be big companies, telecoms, governments, maybe some lawless decentralized group, nonprofits, or a hippie commune. Who knows? But having basic critical thinking skills goes a long way. Trying out these new systems, even ones that might fail, is a step in the right direction. AI is going to be integrated into most of these processes, so understanding AI's role and who controls it isn't optional. We're at a really important time that will determine who controls it, who benefits it, and you're a part of that right now. Thanks for listening. I'm Michael Fiorentino. Keep learning and creating. This podcast is for informational purposes only and reflect personal opinions, not professional advice or guarantees. Ambistream is an early stage startup, and we are actively exploring partnerships and funding opportunities, but this content does not constitute an offer to sell or a solicitation to buy securities. If you're interested in learning more about what we're building, please reach out to me directly for a conversation. This is the Ambistream Media Future Podcast, and I'm Michael Fiorentino. Thanks for listening.